We just listened to the first 2 episodes of a new podcast, and we want to tell you all about it.
The show is called Nobody Should Believe Me, and it's a groundbreaking investigation into Munchausen by proxy. Anyone who listens to Murder Sheet knows we really appreciate a deep dive into a subject. Well, no one has ever done anything of this depth and breadth on the topic before. You will be enthralled by the stories it tells, but even more importantly, you will learn a great deal about how to keep kids in your community safe from harm.
But what makes this show different is that the host of the podcast, novelist Andrea Dunlop, has a uniquely personal connection to this subject. Someone close to her was investigated for Munchausen by proxy a while ago. So to her, this is not just something that happens to other people. Her personal story really gives this show an emotional punch.
It also means she really makes an effort to get at the humanity of all of the people involved, all the victims and survivors. This isn't a podcast that focuses on the gruesome details. It has heart. Andrea really uses her storytelling skills to help us get to know the wide variety of people whose lives have been affected by Munchausen by proxy.
New episodes drop every Thursday. Listen and subscribe to Nobody Should Believe Me on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Content warning. This episode contains discussion of the murder and sexual abuse of children.
So recently, our reporting on the Delphi case has focused a lot upon a lengthy water search that took place in Peru, Indiana, where you had the Indiana State Police and their dive team sort of putting in a lot of resources towards searching the Wabash River, and that our sources told us was connected with the Delphi case. And so today we are going to talk about a different search that was also going on around the same time that we didn't hear about until a little bit more recently. So we'll get into what we know and then some of the context surrounding what we've heard. My name is Áine Cain. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
We first connected while looking into the Burger Chef murders, an Indiana cold case. Together, we built a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of cases of restaurant-related homicides. That original spreadsheet gave way to our podcast, The Murder Sheet.
Now we maintain that same research-centric, investigative approach as we look into all sorts of homicides, including unsolved cases, historical crimes, and, of course, restaurant murders.
We don't just chat about the headlines. Our podcast is a platform for our journalism. The Murder Sheet focuses on investigative reporting, thoughtful analysis, thorough research, and in-depth interviews.
We're the Murder Sheet, and this is
The Delphi Murders, The Other Search.
So earlier we shared with you a little bit of the story that Kevin Kline told police about what happened on the day of the murders. Namely, you'll recall that we said that Kevin Kline told police that Kevin Kline actually was waiting inside a red Jeep at the time the murders were occurring. Now we're going to reveal a bit more about that story that he told. But before we do, we want to repeat the same warning we gave you last time, which is that Kevin Kline is a known liar.
Yes, Kevin Kline is a known liar. I think that you have to pretty much check, verify, look into everything that comes out of his mouth. So not only do we kind of include this caveat whenever we're kind of talking about stories that he's told. But, I think investigators also realize that this person is very challenged when it comes to telling the truth. I think people following this case should really fundamentally understand that.
Most of the activities of which he's been credibly accused of involve creating a life of deceit. The Anthony Shots social media accounts he ran were a complete fabrication. They were him trying to make himself seem younger and better looking and more successful than he really was. This is a man we cannot stress enough. This is a man who lies about everything. And so we're going to tell you some more details about his story, but keep in mind he is a liar. So these additional details may be complete fabrications, they may be partially true, they may be completely true. But we have to approach it with a lot of skepticism.
Yes, I think skepticism and just, the acknowledgement that, we are trying to report on the direction this investigation is going. We are not endorsing Kegan Kline's story, and more of just trying to bring it to the attention of our listeners so they can understand what sort of activities and factors are going in behind the scenes on this very important case where people are searching for justice for Libby and Abby.
And with that in mind, let's tell you a bit more about what Kegan Kline told police happened. Kegan Kline told police that at some point after the murders, some crucial pieces of evidence were destroyed. And he says that these crucial pieces of evidence were just actually destroyed at a fire or burn pit located at the residence of Kegan's grandparents and Tony's parents.
We told you a bit about those two individuals in a previous episode where we discussed Tony Kline's background, and we'll link to that in our show notes. But this is Jerry Kline and Linda Kline.
And we will say that in the past, we made an effort to speak with Linda Kline, and she made it clear that she was not interested in having a conversation with us.
And Jerry Kline has actually passed away. He passed away earlier this year.
Before we go into what the police did with this information, I think it might be helpful to actually discuss what a burn pit or a fire pit is. I know when we recently moved back to Indiana, Áine was surprised to actually find a burn pit in our backyard, our new backyard. She didn't even know what a burn pit was.
Well, yeah, I where I'm from in New York, but burning trash in your yard is not really a thing that I've ever encountered, at least. So the previous owners of our house actually, I guess when they were leaving, decided it would be a good idea to burn their couch on the way out. So that was very fun to have to deal with that in the yard. But it is a thing in Indiana, seemingly, because I remember we'd be out at night and we'd see sort of major fires kind of starting to kind of crop up in the distance in other people's backyards, essentially. And it always kind of alarmed me because I was like, oh my, something's on fire. But apparently that can be kind of a thing here.
And a burn pit is basically, simply put, it is an area on your property which you have designed to be a place where you can safely burn things, usually trash. And that is a relatively common thing here in Indiana. It's not terribly unusual, especially in rural areas. So the story is that some evidence was destroyed at this burn pit on the property of Tony Kline's parents, Kegan Kline's grandparents. And the first thing that comes to mind is that if something was burned there 5.5 years ago, it is extraordinarily unlikely that there would be any remains of that evidence today.
No, because not only was whatever those items were, which we don't know, set on fire, they also were then set on fire again and again, subsequently every time the burn pit was used.
Yes, if you burn something, if you burn a piece of trash and it's consumed by fire, and then like the next day or the next week you burn more trash, and the week or the month after that you continue to burn trash, everything's going to be consumed and be pretty much destroyed. But with all of this said, the state police, the investigators, realized that you have to follow every lead. And we believe that's something they really try hard to do. And so they followed this lead and they conducted a search or a bit of a dig at the burn pit at the residence of Tony Kline's parents. And let's talk a little bit about process. We talked about this some in terms of the Ron Logan search. Typically, when the police want to conduct a search, they have a couple of options. One is you can simply go to the property owner and say, we'd like to search, can you give us permission? Now, in most cases, a property owner is understandably reluctant to let police onto their property to conduct a major search. So what would law enforcement do in a situation like that?
Basically, file an affidavit to obtain a search warrant, a probable cause affidavit that would explain to a judge, here's what we're looking for specifically. You can't just say we're going to just go cruise around and, ransack the house randomly. You have to say we're looking for this based on whatever evidence that we have kind of indicating that this could be important. And the idea is to convince a judge, here's why our reasoning is good enough to disrupt this property owner's privacy, and why we feel we need to do this. So the case needs to be good enough to, elicit that sort of reaction from a judge, although it's certainly not the same thing as being able to charge somebody or, eventually convict them. It's basically saying, here's what we have that's good enough that we feel like we need to look further, as far as I understand it, in layman's terms. Obviously, you're the attorney, not me.
That's basically it, and I really think it's important, that point you made, that a probable cause to conduct a search is very different from a probable cause to arrest someone. And so if you have probable cause for a search, that does not mean you have probable cause for an arrest.
Yes. And could you conceivably successfully file an affidavit and obtain a search warrant basically based on, here is this witness who says that this material was burned here. Can we go look? Would that be something that would likely entice a judge to signing off on this?
I think so. I would not be surprised if that was all it took. Obviously, we haven't seen the probable cause affidavit in this case. We don't even know for sure if there is one. Yeah,
this could be a situation where there was a cooperation on the part of the property owner who said, go ahead. So we don't know the ins and outs on this. We're just trying to explain to everyone in the audience, what goes behind some of these decisions when we're talking about a search, especially if someone's private property.
All we know at this point is that the police took Kagan's story seriously enough on this point that they went out and they searched this burn pit.
Yes. And of course, the water search dominated a lot of attention recently, understandably so. It was a major undertaking by the Indiana State Police and by the dive team there, and it went on for weeks. And it also, sort of was very public, given that it was occurring in the Wabash River and in full view of passersby and media sort of coming by to observe. But this burn pit search obviously was flying under the radar a little bit more, given that it was on private property and certainly less public facing.
And it's an important reminder that there are always more things going on in this case behind the scenes than are readily apparent to the public. We all saw the water search, but even though that was happening, there were other things happening. And there are things happening at all times in this case that are not readily apparent to the public. The police and law enforcement take this case very seriously.
And it's a situation where we feel that, we definitely try to kind of get you the behind the scenes story and the inside story, but sometimes it takes us a while to kind of be able to really put all the pieces together and get enough sources to run with something. I think it's just an important reminder for everyone who's following this case, everyone who's covering this case, to keep an open mind, and we can acknowledge that just because one thing is happening or just because nothing appears to be happening doesn't mean that that's the case, and it may just take a little bit of time before we get the full story. So patience is certainly necessary here. So as for the results of this burn pit search, our understanding was that there were no actionable finds from that, which, again, not terribly surprising given the nature of a burn pit and given the amount of time that has passed by.
And also, of course, there's still likely some analysis. There's still likely some analysis going on of whatever was taken from the burn pit. So when we say that nothing actionable has been found, that's just a tentative situation. It may change.
Yeah, that's our understanding of it from what we know. And the same goes for the water search. I mean, we're talking about possible, when you have searches like these, there may be analysis done, after the search that, may take a little while or might, involve looking at some different things. So we don't want to preemptively or conclusively say anything about the results of either of these, but just giving you what we know so far. So to provide some further context on this story about the burn pit search, we are going to return to some familiar territory, to the transcripts that we obtained and published of Kevin Kline's 2020 interview with Indiana State Police, as well as the 2021 interview that Kevin Kline gave to HLN reporter Barbara McDonald.
It's important to note that the topic of Kevin Kline's grandparents' house comes up in both of those transcripts, as we will see.
So to start off with, Kevin will, I think, speak for the role of Kevin Kline, and I will take on the role of Barbara McDonald in this initial exchange, which again comes from that 2021 transcript that we first published previously this year. So tell me about the 13th. What were you guys doing all day that you know for sure he was with you the whole day?
Well, he doesn't work on Saturday or Sunday and Mondays, so we would always just hang out at the house, go to my grandparents'. I remember that day we watched a wrestling pay-per-view that night, and he was at my grandparents' with me around 5 and 6, and then the rest of the night. But he usually sleeps, because he works third shift, so.
Okay.
He normally sleeps until about 1 or 2, and then we wake up, get lunch, stuff like that.
Okay, and so you know that he was with you from 1 or 2 Monday the 13th?
Right.
Throughout the evening?
Right, yeah.
So that's sort of a brief exchange, but it gets into the idea that, at least at this point, Kevin Kline's alibi that he's giving to Barbara McDonald for himself and his father, Tony, is that they were spending time with Linda and Jerry Kline on the day of the murders. He sort of puts them there in the evening, but she presses him on, more earlier in the day, 1 to 2, and he sort of just says yes. He doesn't really give details around that, which I think is interesting, but in the beginning, he's very much putting them there later in the day. So, interesting.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's just sort of pulling the grandparents into this whole thing, frankly. And it also speaks to, if you erase everything we know about this whole situation, a close relationship. We're going to see the grandparents. It's pretty wholesome, pretty chill. But, they come up again also in the earlier 2020 police interview in a bit of a more detailed way. But it's certainly, we couldn't have, my dad couldn't have been there. He was here with me. But again, earlier in 2020, he was also giving a version of events that involved being at his grandparents' residence that day. And of course, that day was February 13th, 2017.
So I guess now we'll get into that?
Yeah. I will be reading the role of the investigators, Detective Vito and Deputy Clinton, and Kevin will once again be speaking the part of Kevin Kline. And then we go again. Something else that stacks up on top of this is when you talk to investigators. I mean, this is fresh in your mind. You just got back from Vegas. You've been nonstop searching this stuff. You've been talking about it with other girls that knew Libby. You've been searching it before you went to Vegas. And then you tell investigators, I was with my dad all day. We went to Grandma and Grandpa's at noon.
No, I told them I didn't know what. I mean, I don't ever leave, so yeah, I'm probably out at his house, really, but I mean...
I'm telling, again.
I don't remember everything I did.
Well, I'm refreshing your memory.
I told them that I would go and see my grandma and grandpa, a lot.
No, for a fact, audio-video recorded on your interview, you told them a few days after this happened, you know you were with your dad all day, and you knew you went to your grandparents.
Every did, really.
From on your interview, said you either said 12 or 2 or 12 to 3, and then you came back home. That's what you said.
Right.
That's not a I don't remember. That's what you said, right?
No, because he was like, hey, you really need to think about this.
Right, and you
really need to think about.
And that's what you said.
So I was like, well, I mean...
Well, your phone does not line up to that. And again, that's another fact. You don't have to remember it.
Okay, where was my phone at? Please tell me.
So it was at your residence.
All day? Because I don't ever leave there.
Until
when?
You went somewhere near your grandparents' house, but you did not go to your grandparents' house.
Friend one.
Where?
Friend one's house.
Okay.
That's the only other place I'd go. He sold me weed. That's literally the only other place I'd go.
So why lie several times?
But I don't. I don't think I ever lied, but I'm saying if I left my house on that day, it was to go to my grandparents or to friend one's.
You said in an interview, audio recorded to 2 law enforcement officers, including an FBI agent.
Right.
You said, I was here at home from this time to this time. Then I went to my grandparents, and then we went right back home. And I was with my dad the entire time. Done. I know that for a fact because you said it, and that's what you said.
Okay.
But now you're telling me you...
Where were you last Monday at 7:45 p.m.?
Probably at home. But again...
Okay, I was probably at home.
This is... But what I'm telling you...
I mean, do you get what I'm saying, though?
No, I don't, because...
I mean, you don't, okay?
You're...
Okay, where were you Monday at 7:45?
Kegan, this isn't about...
Why don't you...
Me.
No. You see what I'm saying, though?
No.
People don't remember every little thing about life.
They do when it involves them.
When I had nothing to do with it. So why would I even remember what I was doing?
One of the last people to... This is why...
Okay.
This is...
But if I...
Such a big deal.
Did that, don't you think I would know exactly where I was at?
Yes, and that's what you told people.
Exactly.
But it was a lie.
Okay, so where was my phone at?
I told you it was at your house.
Exactly.
And then it went to where? It was in Grandma and Grandpa's.
Where was it?
I'll tell you that much.
Where was it? Was it in Peru?
Yep.
Exactly.
Country Club Road. Whose house is that?
Country Club Road? I have no clue. That's where my grandma... my grandma lives on out by...
Paw
Pike, yeah.
Right. It wasn't there.
Country Club Road and Paw Pike meet.
I understand that, but you connected to a Wi-Fi source that was in that house.
No, I did not. I'm telling you 1,000%. I don't go anywhere besides friend one and my grandma's.
So why did you tell investigators that you went there when you didn't?
Because he was like, well, where do you ever go? That's the only places I go. I don't know what I was doing on that day. 2 weeks ago, I don't fucking know.
So you...
It's like if someone asked me right now, what were you doing 2 weeks ago on a Monday?
Okay.
I have not the slightest clue.
So then with your logic then, back then, when you said that maybe you weren't with Dad all day then?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so right?
I don't know. Yeah, I went to my...
Could be possible?
Yeah, the only time I ever really left my dad was when I would go to friend one's, really, and get weed. That's about it.
And would you search...
I didn't have a car.
Did you...
Nowhere to go.
Would it be normal for you to go look up porn at Grandma and Grandpa's house?
No.
Because that's what you were doing on your phone at the time you said
That's fine.
Said you were there?
I wasn't doing that.
Then who was?
Friend one. That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, I don't...
It's not.
Hang out with no one besides friend one.
So how do you know friend one did it then? Because you don't remember what happened.
All this pointing to him, like, more and more. Like, the more you keep saying, like, I'm like, if I'm not at my grandma and grandpa's house, I'm not with my dad, I would be at friend one's. Did I get fucked up that day? I have no clue what I was doing.
So here we're getting a much more detailed sort of accounting of the various stories Kegan Kline told about his grandparents' house and sort of his alibi for the day of February 13th, 2017. And it's looking a little bit more complicated than what he told Barbara McDonald later on.
How so?
Well, so basically, investigators are confronting him and saying that in 2017, he told them that part of the alibi for that day was being at his grandparents' house. And that now, in 2020, he's going back saying he doesn't remember anything about that day. He's evading, basically, why his phone was connecting to a Wi-Fi source somewhere in Peru, somewhere perhaps even in the vicinity, but not at his grandparents' house. So it's sort of, basically they're catching him in a lie. And the idea that, he was here, his father was at the grandparents' house at that time is sort of being looked upon as more of a suspicious claim rather than something that's a credible alibi for the day. And as usual, Kegan Kline is very much avoiding taking responsibility for anything and is basically attempting seemingly to assign blame for all of this to friend number one, who he basically claims would frequently steal his phone when he was passed out on drugs, look up child porn in his own house, and, engage in this sexual deviant behavior on his friend's phone all the time. Even today, even that specific day on February 13th, 2017, where from his telling, it sounds like friend one is being accused of, basically stealing his phone and going around to different locations to look up porn. So it's in case it's not apparent from the tone of my voice, that is very, very hard to believe. I mean, that's I feel like a ridiculous story. And it seems like investigators would agree with that.
Yes, as we said before, Kegan Kline has a real tendency to lie, and he's not even a good liar, frankly.
I also think it's important to remember that, on the internet, people love to speculate about this case, and I think there's a tendency to want to draw in more people so it's more complicated and, a major conspiracy. And we would just encourage everyone to kind of, when Kegan Kline is trying to throw someone under the bus, really take that with a huge grain of salt, because he's trying to basically absolve himself of any wrongdoing here. So, we're not saying that there weren't more people involved. We're not saying there were, we're not saying anything either way, because we're just trying to report the facts of what we're hearing about the investigation. We're not necessarily trying to jump to a ton of conclusions here, but, we would just recommend that people be cautious around that. And just because someone's being smeared by Kegan Kline, I don't think we need to necessarily run with that. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say.
Yeah. I think altogether, though, hopefully this gives us more of a sense of the grandparents' house and how that location pertains to this case so far. We have it being used as a partial alibi for the day in question where Libby and Abby were murdered, and Kegan Kline is telling stories about he and his dad visiting them that day. Kegan Kline is also stating that he and his father were over there a lot in general, that it was a common thing for them to go visit the grandparents and, say hello and have family activities there. So sort of establishing it as a bit of a central focus here for the time being. And then in the case of, with this search happening now, it's kind of becoming more relevant even again, because investigators were actively looking for evidence in the case there. So altogether, kind of gives us a sense of perhaps the importance of this one location. to the case at this point.
And just a quick reminder, we are always looking for more people on the ground in Peru, in Delphi, who notice things, who see things, and let us know what they're noticing. And so if you are out there on the ground and you notice something, please contact us at murdersheet@gmail.com. And as always, we protect our sources and we will keep you anonymous if that's what you want. Thanks so much for listening to the Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.